And welcome back to the Sports Source. This segment of our program is brought to you by A.G. Hines Company. When it comes to the best building materials for your new home, your renovation, whatever do-it-yourself project you're working on, A.G. Hines Company has what you need. They provide building materials for the biggest contractors in all of East Tennessee, but they do it at great prices. So you, the do-it-yourselfer, the person working in your home, you can take advantage of these same great materials, same terrific tools that they have on sale, and 100 years of expertise. A.G. Hines Company, located right in downtown Knoxville. All right, everyone is talking about Tennessee's inconsistency, including Rick Barnes. I've butted some of his sound bites together, and here's what he said last night after the game.
I would say the inconsistency is coming from our older players, and that's the disappointing thing. We should be putting the pressure on the younger guys to do what they've been trying to do for us. And yeah, they're good players, they're talented players, but we still need a balance. We need some of those guys going to make big, hustle plays, get the stick backs, but more importantly, just when we call a play to try to work through them wanting to play with the kind of force and the kind of aggression that you want them to play with, as opposed to just going through the motion. I think it also gets back with DNA. I think you've got to understand that you have to compete every single night at a very, very high level. And if you're not going to do that, I think you're going to struggle. I think you're going to be up and down. I think it's an every night thing. I think that you come out of a timeout and you start anticipating the guy's going to do this without being on edge, knowing that he can also he's setting you up for a back cut. If you're not on edge and if you don't understand that every possession matters, you're not going to get consistency. And it doesn't matter if you're playing offense or defense. You need some dogs, that are just going to bite you. You need some junkyard dogs, regardless of how the game's going. They're going to bite. They're not going to bark. They're going to bite. And there's a lot of people that bark but with no bite. But you need those dogs if you got them. And where it's just like you said, it can't always be coaches. It's got to be. It's a player's game. It always has been. It always will be. But we need more of that. We talk about it. I can tell you this: we need more of it, and we don't really care who does it. We just need more of it.
I'm not going to pay Vince Ferrara for that small cameo, by the way. Inconsistency from older players. Need to be more aggressive. Give effort every night. Don't just go through the motions. Need more dogs on the court. You're 19 games into the season, boys. I don't see any reason to think that you're going to suddenly start seeing a switch get flipped. Am I wrong here? See any reason for optimism on the inconsistency front, or is that just who they are?
No, if you're watching the games, you're not seeing it because what you know is when you get to the tournament, you don't get weaker opponents. You don't get a Georgia. Georgia's not going to the NCAA tournament. Kentucky's not going. So these opponents that Tennessee has maybe looked a little bit better against, they don't show up when it's game by game by game. You have to be on. We're several months in. Go back to the Missouri game to open up SEC play, and at that point, Tennessee looked like it was almost unbeatable. But it's been the opposite of that since then. Very beatable game by game. One game Tennessee can look really good against Kansas, but easily can give it back up.
That inconsistency is the reason I'm not real optimistic about them making a deep run in the NCAA tournament anymore. I was at one point. Do they have the top 10 potential? Yes, they do. Are there games where they play like it? There are. Are there stretches where they play like it? Yes. But consistency is not there. And I'm going to go back to what Mark said. I think a lot of it has to do with the lack of the point guard play. And I think this, and I know there'll be a lot of people say you would disagree with this. I think that as good as Grant Williams was when Tennessee was playing, if you told me, do you want Grant Williams or Jordan Bone, I'd almost be tempted to say I'd like Jordan Bone right now because I think the point guard play has been that deficient so far.
Yeah, like Barnes said in his comments, I wrote it down, work through them, work through their post guards. The problem is you can't work through somebody that doesn't have one-on-one or is not showing one-on-one capabilities. So the guys are getting the ball. Farquharson is getting the ball inside at times, but there's not space to operate, and he's not great in operating once he gets the ball. And so I think from an inconsistency, as a coach, it's not about the making the shots and all that stuff is great, but really it's that effort piece. And if he feels that there's inconsistent effort, then that's a problem. And that's where when you get into the NCAA tournament, like these guys are saying, you can get beat by a mid-major team because if you've not had the habits of playing really hard all the time, these mid-majors come in, they're hungry, and that's why you see those 5-12 upsets
Every
because
year.
of that effort piece. And so, to me, though, there's the disconnect of what is the identity of this team. Is it because they need a dog, or is it because they just need to figure out what's their offensive identity? And that's what they're struggling with right now.
At some point, doesn't that come back to the coach? I mean, yesterday, Rick Barnes said it's the older players are the inconsistent ones. My post players need to be more aggressive. It always seems, he made the comment there in those clips, about this game's about players, not coaches. Okay, then give some of your money back. Now, I'm someone who was in favor of the race, think he keeps the program between the white lines. He's always going to get you in the mix. I think he's worth it. But at the same time, at what point do we look at this and say, what is your role in this, Rick?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a big fan of the consistent calling the guys out in post game and talking about what they're not doing. I'm just not a fan of that. I just think of that in anybody in business. If you're continuing to talk about your
Yes.
employees, the business owner, it's like that just doesn't resonate well with me. But he's been successful, right? So he's had his way. I think all the love and admiration that he's received the last couple of years, unbelievably well deserving. Now, when your team's struggling and not meeting expectations, you got to also rise up and say, hey, I've got to put my name out on there. I've got to mention what I'm not doing as well,
Yes.
and I've got to get better. And he's not done that. And I think that can cause players who are more self-aware than ever before with social media. They see those clips, they know that stuff, and if their names being drawn through the mud in some regards in the media, I know they know you love them because you're there with them all the time. But eventually, I don't think that helps to getting it back to where
You also have to see if they respond to it. If Grant Williams responds to it
Right.
better
Yes.
than John Fulkerson does, well, then apply it more to Grant than to John. And that's just one example here. But if it's not working, then I would look for another method too.
One other thing I want to throw out here, and this is in no way a defense of their inconsistency. This team is inconsistent. But one of the things you look at in basketball, most teams are inconsistent. We tend, a fan of Kentucky, or, well, that's a bad example this year, they're consistently bad. But when you look at a team that's up and down, you're watching your team. So it seems like you're the only team in the country that's doing this. I went through yesterday just the Power 5 schools who play really big, not Drake, Belmont, Gonzaga. You put Tennessee in a league like that, they're going to have a consistent looking record. But just the Power 5 teams, how many of them are winning 80% of their games? Tennessee's at 73%. I wanted to see how many Power 5 teams out of 65 are winning 80% of the games this year, consistent. 5. That's it. So 7% of the Power 5. It's a small group. A couple of years ago when Tennessee was number 1 for a month, they were in that handful of teams. Again, I'm not trying to defend Tennessee. I'm just saying that occasionally we look at Tennessee and we say they're the only team that's inconsistent, when the reality is most of these teams are inconsistent. I think it's a sport where a lot of it rides on, were you hot tonight? No. Well, we lost. I mean, that's a chunk of it. Right or wrong on the inconsistency kind of is par for the course for a lot of these teams.
Well, yeah, I think we look at in our own bubble and we don't see what's going on across the country. So I think that's a great stat, and a lot of it does boil down to, do you have shot makers? Last night, Smart, although his name's spelled with a $, not an S, Smart was making more shots than we were last night, so they got the win.
He was worth every penny.
He was money on the floor.
When we come back, how far off were our predictions about this Tennessee basketball team? What did we get wrong? I hope you got an hour or two, because it's going to be a long list. Come on back on the Sports Source.